There were some things in Groundhog Day that I liked, but some things that I hated so passionately, and I need to get that off my chest today and talk about it in this review, because I've been waiting to see Groundhog Day for a while, as I'm sure many of you also have been waiting a while, and I went in with not necessarily super high expectations, but just really ready to enjoy it. You know, the stage was set for them to just do their thing and for me to be clapping along like a rabid seal by the end. And yeah, I walked out sort of confused, and I want to dig into that today. So let's start with the good. The book's by Danny Rubin, music and lyrics by Tim Minchin, and the title role of Phil Connors is played by Andy Karl. He's reprising his role here, and I thought Andy was brilliant. He is pretty much the exact kind of Phil Connors that I would imagine in my head. He has a real sense of bitterness about the world to him when the show begins, and nonchalantness, and just a real distasteful vibe that is perfect for the character, and seeing that mature through the show and seeing it evolve is obviously the point of the entire show, and he portrays that transformation very well. I also want to commend Tanisha Spring playing Rita. I thought that she was fantastic as well, and she also manages to pull off some fairly challenging numbers in certain moments. Like at one point, she's tasked with belting this song, and it's a really big number, but she has to do that while climbing and clambering over a couch, and it's just not something that I can imagine is particularly easy, but she pulled it off with complete finesse, so I thought she did great. The best thing about the show for me is the staging, the lighting, the set design, the prop design, etc. I was blown away by the amount of money that they have clearly spent on making this show a spectacle, irrespective of the usual kind of core suspects of what makes an exciting musical, like really banging songs or things like that. No, let's just push that to the side for the time being. This one goes all out with the set. They have so many things that come on stage for a 5-second gag, but it's a big deal. Like, for example, at one moment, the entire back of the stage opens up and there is a ladder back there, and Phil has to climb the ladder, and he then jumps off the ladder because his mental health's not doing so well at that point. And that gag is only there for genuinely about 20 seconds, and then it's gone, and you never see it again. And there are probably upwards of 30 moments like this through the show. A door that becomes very crucial in the center of the stage that then transforms later to be a much more threatening looking door. There's a hospital wing. There's an amazing moment where this blizzard is howling down over the stage. It looks so phenomenal. There's characters dancing in it. It's really quite affirming as a human in that moment, because you're like, wow, they're just enjoying life. They're loving life, just as I would hope to do in a moment like that. There's this really wonderful scene with these colored lights that are then moved around by different actors, and it was really lovely to see. There's also all of these projections throughout with upside down snowfall and just generally things to give you the sense that things are not quite right and you're still trapped in the loop. All of that stuff was fantastic, and the core piece of set design, the bedroom which Phil continuously wakes up in, is also lovely. It's on a revolve, and it revolves back and forth across the stage throughout the show, and is very, very well used, often in the background, but rotated so you can only see the back face of it, not the bedside. And on that side, you've got all of these houses, and it creates this beautiful little sort of facade of the background of the town. It works so well. I thought that Hugh Vanstone on lighting and Rob Howell on set and costume did so fantastically in bringing all of this world to life in such a colorful and special way. They did great. Mixed in with all that is also Paul Keeve on illusions, and there are multiple moments in the show where, for example, he jumps off the ladder, and as you can imagine, that doesn't go well for him. There are other moments where he walks off stage left and then suddenly he is already singing stage right. It's fantastic. And it's never done in a way that sort of has you going, oh, I wonder how they're doing that. And then you watch it and you're like, oh, I see what's happening there. Like, there's enough going on around you that you actually forget that you're trying to kind of pay attention to the gags in that moment. And then boom, it happens again. And you're like, oh, how do they keep getting me? Really, really fantastic. Now then, let's talk negative. First of all, when the show began, I was a little sort of surprised because it was really, really loud. This really loud opening moment and really exciting, really dazzling. And then Andy started singing, and I was like, oh, I can hear him, and it's okay, but the sound isn't of the same sort of quality bar that I would expect in the West End. I was watching it at the Old Vic, and I've not been to the Old Vic before, I don't think, at least. So maybe this is just how things sound in the Old Vic. but to my ear, it wasn't nearly as clear as I needed it to be. Just to be specific here, because I realized I didn't say this specifically while I was recording, I felt like Phil's voice especially was a little further back in the mix than it should have been at times. And just generally, all of the characters did feel a little bit drowned out by the band. It didn't feel like they were as forward and as center as I would have liked them to be. And there was also a little bit of an issue maybe with a very, very slight, just a couple milliseconds delay between hearing Phil's voice come out of his mouth or hearing Andy's voice come out of his mouth and hearing it on the speakers. Just a really, really minor drift in time there that meant that any singular syllable felt a little wider than it should have been, and that led to a kind of clarity bleed throughout. And so even just in the first act, I found myself really having to pay attention to his mouth to try and understand the words that he was saying, because it was just getting lost a little bit. And then as the show went on, that got more and more problematic. Because it's a Tim Minchin show, right? And Tim Minchin is known, I think, at this point, for massive walls of sound, this rock opera vibe where you have a character singing and maybe there's some contrary motion happening elsewhere with a different character singing at the same time, but then there's also a chorus singing at the same time, and the band are also just chugging along and they're really blaring. And it means that if you don't have really crystal clear sound quality, you're just going to miss words and you're going to miss gags and you're going to miss important parts of the show. And that kept happening to me throughout. And this is something that I generally really feel is a barrier to fully enjoying a piece of work when I go see it and it has these problems. So just straight off the bat, it was in a bad spot in that regard. It wasn't the worst I've ever seen, don't get me wrong, but I feel like it should have been better. And for the record also, I had a really good seat. It wasn't like I was sitting in some faraway cubbyhole of the theatre. I was smack bang in the middle of the stalls. It was a really great seat. I got a discount on it and still had the problem. And I just wish that it had been a bit more clear. Next up, we have the issue of the weird kind of timing of things. So for starters, Act 1 felt so long. I cannot describe to you how many times I sat there going, oh, this is just a single act musical. Oh, right, okay. But wait, surely we're going towards an interval here, right? So it must be a 2-act musical. Oh, no, nope, it's still going. This has just got to be 1 act. There's no way that 4 hours haven't already passed here. So we must be coming towards the end of the show. Like, that's what my internal narrative was saying throughout. It's just a really damn long feeling Act 1. And I think part of that is maybe because of the fact that it's repetitive. Like, that's the entire point, obviously. And I didn't mind the repetition at all, but I think that maybe that makes you feel like it's taking longer than it actually is. But I also feel like there's just a lot of really long numbers and really long songs. And those drawn out songs also often have a huge number of people involved. They are big, big numbers. And I think that might be a bit fatiguing for the audience. And so the audience is sort of like almost being pushed back into their seat by this wall of sound and this barrage of light and music and dance and color. And I think that kind of makes you feel like time's passing a bit more slowly, to be honest, because you're like, oh my God, this is a real lot to take in right now. And that is a positive. It's a spectacle. It's a real masterful display of theatrical elements, but it's pretty tiring, I think. And so it felt like Act 1 lasted forever. And then you get this build in Act 1 towards the end of it, and you feel like it sort of ends in a pretty good moment, I would say. And then Act 2 begins, and you get this song called Playing Nancy. And I've got to say, I detest this song. I think that it doesn't fit in the musical in any way. And I think that it also, just in general, isn't a very good song. So the context here is, it's basically doing the trope of the hot girl is actually a person too, guys. Let's stop forgetting that. It's that song. To read you a few lyrics, she says, is it my destiny to be a brief diversion, just a detour on the journey of some man? There's no point in protesting. If you look good in tight jeans, that's what they'll want you dressed in. It's that kind of song, right? Like, she's lamenting the fact that she is typecast and isn't given room to show off the actual person that she is. She's just completely objectified. And I actually looked up whether or not other people had issues with this song, and turns out they have done. I found a couple of forum posts talking about it, and the arguments for and against it kind of go like this. The for argument is, Act 1 shows Phil being very egotistical the entire time, and it's all about him. We don't have any opportunities to really learn about other characters, and so it's just the story of Phil. And so by starting Act 2 with a number that focuses on a side character in such an apparent and obvious way, and she literally says in the song, am I just going to be reduced to being a detour for a man forever? It really makes it obvious to us, the viewers, that actually, we should be considering the other characters in the cast here, and that's exactly what needs to happen in Act 2 in order for Phil to succeed, so it sets the tone in that way. There are also people that say, well, it's really meta because the actress playing Nancy in this moment is sort of breaking the fourth wall and saying, well, yeah, I'm typecast in playing this character that's only interesting because of her looks, and I just turn up and play the role, and I feel like I'm stuck in a loop as well. So there's some meta commentary there. And then other people have said, oh yeah, and that's actually got parallels to other Tim Minchin works which break the fourth wall towards the start of Act 2. And I understand all those points, but I just don't really buy it. Because first of all, it makes out like Nancy is going to become an important character in the rest of the show, where actually she isn't at all. And that's not me trying to diminish her presence in the show. That's just the facts. She just isn't a key character going forward from that point on. She gets this big sort of celebratory moment saying, I need to stand up for myself a little bit maybe. And then for the rest of the show, she's just reduced to being in a relationship, again, with another guy. We don't know how it's going to go. We don't know how it's going to turn out. Maybe the guy's going to treat her better. Wouldn't that be nice? But she is still just a puzzle piece that attaches to a man. So nothing has changed. And are we meant to lament that for her? Are we meant to have sympathy for her? Well, no, I don't think so, because the show displays her just getting with another guy as a real moment of success. It's something that is celebrated, but it's celebrated in complete side staging. It's not a main point at all. It's weird. So we get this like, yay, go women moment at the start of Act 2, and then it's like, actually, never mind. Like, what? So I don't like that aspect of it. I also don't like the fact that there is no need for a meta reflection of that actress's personal feelings in the start of Act 2 of the show. Like, yes, if it fit into the wider tapestry, fair enough. But I don't feel like it does. It certainly doesn't tell us anything that we don't already know. Like, we know that Phil is a horrible person in Act 1. He's super egotistical. We get that. And we get that he is objectifying Nancy every time that she walks past, and that that's bad. Like, no one in the audience is sitting there scratching their head going, but I thought it was fine to catcall people. No, people get that already. And so to start Act 2 and sort of like hit the audience over the head with it, being like, P.S. objectification is bad, guys, right? Like, it's trying to sort of score a cheap win of people being like, yeah, this show does have good values. Like, it's got good values anyway. We don't need to be beat over the head with it in this way. So that felt a little bit like, okay, well, I'm all for it, but at the same time, I don't feel like you're actually doing that message any favors by making it so heavy-handed and so labored in this way. And if it was back to back with another moment where Nancy is really important, then sure, maybe I would be able to see more obvious character progression there, or see it being more of a story being told. But in this case, it's an isolated, hey guys, by the way, don't objectify. And then Phil goes back to, and then we move on from Nancy and we just sort of stop focusing on her. Like, part of me wonders, did Tim Minchin just feel bad for having someone need to be catcalled in his show? And so he wanted to be able to provide a moment where that person could reflect on the fact that they literally signed up to be catcalled, which is something that they undoubtedly already go through in real life really regularly. Like, maybe he wanted to give an opening in the show for that person to get that out of their system a bit. And I respect that. I support that. But I don't necessarily support it being shoehorned in. I support it being weaved in, but not just like a, okay, here's your soapbox moment. Like, it just didn't feel good to me. It felt cheap, I think. I think that's probably the word that I would use, which is really unfortunate because it's a really important message as well, just one that I didn't think was delivered in the best possible way. And the last gripe I have with the show, and this is probably the main thing I would say, is that so much is happening at all times that if there's even a little bit of a slip up or the sound is just not quite right in a given moment or what have you, it becomes a barrage of information, like I said, light, color, sound, all this stuff that's actually really hard to take in. A great example of this is the song Stuck, in which Phil is talking about feeling like he's stuck, which makes sense, obviously. And I would just like to invite you, I don't know what the copyright rules are with this sort of thing, but I'd like to invite you to pull up the song on Spotify and go to this timestamp, okay? I want you to all head to about the 3-minute mark or the 2:55 mark in the original Broadway recording of the show. There are 5 different things going on at that point in the song. Play it now while I'm talking to you. It'll actually enhance what I'm about to say. There's multiple things going on. It's total chaos, and it's meant to feel that way, right? It's meant to feel hard to follow, meant to feel a bit hard to track, etc. But now imagine that you're hearing that out of an old iPhone 3GS speaker from 2007, and all of the width of the different vocal performances and different sort of soundscapes being painted are crammed into a much narrower little box, and you just have to try and figure out what's happening there. That is what it feels like when the sound in the theater is not perfect, and there is even the tiniest little slip from the cast in delivering that performance. On a Broadway soundtrack, yeah, sure, it's been recorded, it's meant to feel chaotic, and it does, but it still retains some clarity as to the different strands of music going on at once concurrently. But when things slip just 1%, as they always will in a live performance, this is not me critiquing the cast for a second, it's just that they're human and they're not there in Ableton in real time, like adjusting the exact timing of all of the words that they're saying to make it perfectly locked to the tempo of the piece. Like, it's just not happening. So you have imperfect sound plus the 1% drift plus the fact that it's chaotic in the first place. And it just means that the audience at times ends up kind of checking out. You're just like, whoa, okay, that's a lot. Yep. Noises are happening, and I'll wait a little bit longer. Okay, some things are happening. That sounded like that was a joke. Okay, he mentioned someone being a dick, or he said kiss my ass, or he said something funny, but now we're back to chaos. Okay, now it's over, I can tune in again. And that was a particularly difficult moment for it, a particularly egregious example of this, but it happens throughout the show. I think that it's such a bombardment in many ways that it's hard to feel like a lot of the songs are catchy. It's hard for them to get in your head because you're actually almost forcibly checked out of a lot of the spectacle on stage. And that was my main problem with Groundhog Day. I really wanted to love it, and there are aspects of it that I did absolutely fall head over heels in love with. I thought it was so endearing in moments and such a lovely human story in other moments. But there were certain other things that just meant that I really struggled to enjoy it. And I think I will go back at some point, but I'm probably going to wait for it to transfer from the Old Vic to somewhere else. I really hope it does, because the show absolutely deserves that. I just didn't fully feel like I could enjoy it for what it was in the moment when I saw it yesterday. If you like theatre reviews like this, then follow for more. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.